because it gives you a multiple choice. And I'm like, I did not know that. I really did not. And I was wondering if that was just a, blind spot in my. I also did not know that the original name for Ghostface from Scream was Father Death. That is not as good.
I didn't know that either.
Yep.
No,
That's a
Yep.
sounds
terrible,
good.
unless it's a priest. I guess that's fine.
Yep. I also did not know that H.P. Lovecraft's hatred of seafood was a prime inspiration for Cthulhu. That seemed like a joke. Apparently, that's true.
That guy was weird as fuck, though, from everything I've read.
Yeah. Yeah.
His mom didn't do him any, justice.
No.
Hello, I'm Patrick R. McDonough. Thank you for joining us. If it's your first time, hit that subscribe button. If you're returning, welcome back. I'm joined by my friend Brennan LaFaro. Say hello, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And our other friend, Candace Nola. Say hello, Candace.
Hello.
Today, we're talking with the author, Kristopher Rufty. We are definitely going to be talking about Pillowface because that is a absolutely killer book. But I'm going to say, Candace, take us away.
Wow,
Jumped right
okay.
in.
Jump right in, why don't we?
With
Well,
both
it's
feet.
not every day that I get to talk to one of my biggest inspirations. So, Mr. Rufty, how are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm alive. I'm good. So I wanted to lead because one, I think these two folks here know that you and I are friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a little bit more about you than they do. So I figured we would start with your intro to the industry itself. If you wanted to talk a little bit about the radio show that you had and how that led into some of the other stuff that you do.
Yeah, I used to do a radio show called Diabolical Radio. It was something that I started with my friends, just because this was like, hold on, 2006, 2007. Um, and we started it because we wanted to talk to people that made independent movies. That was basically why we did it. We were making, or trying to make independent movies, and we thought a good way to learn this stuff was to let's create a show and have these people come on, and then we can talk to them about it and learn. And who knows, maybe we'll have contacts and stuff like that. But I was a huge reader, and I was reading um, a book by Michael Lamo that had just come in through the Leisure Book Club, and we had just launched the show. And I sent Michael Lamo a message on MySpace, and he said he would come on the show. And he sort of opened my eyes to, because I was buying these paperbacks and thinking like all these people were millionaires, and so I was like, when he told me he worked a day job, I was like, you still work a what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's when I do my writing is on the train to go to work. And I was like, so you still have like a regular job? I said, well, how's that work? And he started explaining to me that, well, just because you're an author and putting books out, he goes, that doesn't mean that's all you do. He goes, this doesn't put food on the table. And I was like, oh man. I was like, do I really want to try and do this? But I did the show for quite a few years and made friends with like Ronald Malfi, Wrath James White, Jeff Strand, Jack Ketchum, which was great. He actually came on the show several times. He co-hosted the Richard Lehman show with me, which is still a dream come true.
Yeah.
Had John Saul come on, and I had all these archives of interviews. Like Joe Lansdale, I have 3.5 hours of just Joe Lansdale and I talking. I still have it. Whenever I'm like feeling down or need some type of pick me up, I'll
How
just.
much talking did you do, though? Sorry to interrupt, but
Oh no, you're fine.
I know how much Joe talks, man.
Uh, Probably a little bit more than I should have, especially with like Lansdale, and especially with Jack Ketchum, because I was so excited. And it was kind of like when I first introduced Jack Ketchum, I said, I just want to pause here for a minute because I'm like, holy shit, I'm talking to Jack Ketchum. And he just started laughing. He goes, "I'm just a dude." So I was just like, well, yeah, not to me, but I got to learn a lot from them before I even submitted one piece of fiction anywhere. And one thing that they all told me was, save your rejections. And I'm sitting there thinking like, nah, I'll hit it out of the park. So from like 2007 to 2011, constant submissions. That's how long it finally before I got my chance to do it.
Okay. So I know you went from that to writing to screenplays and movies. So which do you want to kind of talk about first, the writing or some of your work on your movies?
Um, well, the writing and the work on the movies kind of go hand in hand. So any of it's fine.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us about your movies first, and then we'll jump into the books.
There's not too much to tell about the movies.
There's enough.
We have made, let's see, one, two, three, four. I've made five, and three of them actually were released. Nothing big, but they kind of came out, were out for a little bit, and went away. So one of them still, you can see it on like Vudu and Tubi and all this. It was originally called Rags, but they changed the title of it to Alice in Deathland. So if you go and search Alice in Deathland on Tubi or Vudu or anything like that, any of the streaming services, that's my movie. I made that. And it was highly influenced by Edward Lee. So yeah, I was writing scripts, and I was writing scripts for other people while also trying to be published. And Ronald Malfi came on my radio show all those years ago, and he and I kind of clicked because he was doing the exact same thing that I was doing, except for he was already published. And so he was like, "Yeah," he goes, "just keep in touch with me afterward." And he was sort of the bridge that took me from writing screenplays to writing books. He was the one who took Angel Board, my first book, and sent it to Don Doria, who used to be at Leisure but was just starting Sam Hain, and that was where the movies sort of led me to writing books, and then I just kind of never looked back. Although I do miss writing screenplays. I would love to write some scripts for people again.
Yeah. All right. I think my other two friends here have a couple of questions, and then we'll
Okay.
jump into books.
Well, thank you, Candace.
Brennan,
Appreciate it.
sure.
I want to talk a little about Sam Hain. Now, forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I believe you were a big fan of the Leisure books, and then
Oh
to
yeah.
be able to, work with Don at Sam Hain must have been really cool. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that, but before we do, to kind of transition from the screenplay aspect, I had read that you said that a lot of times, a screenplay will be somewhere around 120, 150 pages, and yours usually branched out to more like 200
Yeah.
because you focused a little more on inner
Yeah.
monologue and
Mhm.
novel stuff, if you will. And you thought that maybe that would make the transition to novel writing a little bit more seamless, and that wasn't the case. I wonder if you
Oh
could
no,
talk
wasn't the
about
case at
that.
all. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, because I wrote a werewolf script for this production company in Wisconsin, and I guess it was at the time was produced by the people that did that show Monk. I don't know if you remember that show it was on USA, but they were like, yeah. So how the director was the movie never got made, by the way, but the director was talking. He was like, yeah, the screenplay is good, but you know, with the way Chris writes the inner dialogue with all the characters and their thoughts and descriptions, he goes, it took a hour and a half movie and made it a miniseries. But I remember reading an interview with Edward Lee, and he was saying that a lot of his first drafts he writes is screenplays. I don't know if that's still the case, but at one time he did that. And I remember thinking, like, oh yeah, I've been writing stories and stuff for years, and I've read tons of books, and I've read tons of how-to books, and I bet writing a novel would be the same as writing a screenplay, except for instead of putting the dialogue in the middle of the page, put it to the left, and instead of present tense, I put it in past tense. I was like, piece of cake. That was so wrong. I was so wrong. I think it was Tor, the publisher, because I was at a Heather Graham conference and I met the editor for Tor, and we hit it off really well. And I was thinking, I was like, yeah, he's going to read Angel Board and that's it. And I sent him Angel Board. He was like, man, he goes, you could have trimmed out 2,000 words from the first chapter. He was like, he goes, this book, he goes, it's good. Don't get me wrong. He was like, but we don't usually pick up first novels from people that write Stephen King thick books. And I was like, well, what am I doing wrong? And he goes, remember how you wrote screenplays and you're talking about you putting the inner monologues in? I was like, yeah. He goes, take those out of the books too. And I thought he was crazy. But then, when I was reading like Richard Lehman and Jack Ketchum, I started getting really into the pulps, like the old 50s crime fiction stories. And I was like, they could write a story that takes place over the span of a few hours and have a beginning, middle, and end, but they do it in like 150 pages. It blew my mind that, you didn't have to branch it out. So it was definitely a learning experience going from one to the other. And that's why I wonder now if I could even go back to the other if I was given the opportunity. I don't know. We'll have to see how that went.
It's a balancing act because you wanna let the audience get to know everything that you feel like you know about the character, but at the same time, movement is so crucial. We've
Mm-hmm.
all picked up that novel that it's like, okay, I'm interested in this person, but like I can't picture what action they've done for the last 3 pages. They're just I'm in
Right.
their
Yeah.
head and I don't know what the hell is going on or what's around them.
Yeah.
Uh,
One of the hardest things that I had to learn was telling the story that you're telling presently, while also telling about who that person is. In the meantime. So that was like one mistake I kept constantly making was flashbacks. I kept writing flashbacks. I'm like, I don't have to write an entire flashback about a traumatic experience that happened. I was like, you should be able to sum that up in 2 paragraphs. Depending on what the traumatic experience is, or if it's crucial to the story moving forward. Sometimes it's not, and that was like the hardest thing, especially for the first 3 books I wrote that got rejected constantly. Was like Angel Board's a perfect example. Like at the beginning, the guy attempts to kill himself, and in the finished book, I finally just went and said, okay, he starts with him in the bathroom. He gets in the tub, he slits his wrist, and then it goes from there. That's how it ends up now. But before that, it was like 15 pages of why he was going to do it. And I was like,
mm,
no, we can focus on why he does it, starting in chapter 2, and just kind of move ahead and keep going. And but it's like I wanted people to understand, like, this guy just felt like he had nothing left. And but then I didn't need the 15-page backstory, beforehand. So
and your readers probably thank you for that lean and mean
yeah.
version. Um, so how do you feel? Obviously, as a fan of the leisure books, you knew who Don was before you got the chance to work with him. But how did his editing kind of shape your writing style going forward?
Big time. Another thing he was really big on was he kept saying that I was a splatter punk, but I was trying to wear a mystery writer's clothes, and I didn't ever understand what that meant. And so he goes, well, you have your Ray Gartons, which I love Ray Garton. He goes, Richard Lehman, love Richard Lehman. He goes, Jack Ketchum, Edward Lee. He goes, we had all those at Leisure. He goes, we have none of those at Sam Hain. He goes, that's you. And he goes, but you're trying to hide it. And I was like, okay. He goes, quit trying to hide it. And he goes, and also put your thesaurus away. And I was like, what are you talking about? As I'm sitting there looking at my thesaurus on my desk, I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I was talking to him on the phone. And he goes, you got a thesaurus on your desk, don't you? And I was like, no, but it was like right there. And he goes, well, whatever you're using, quit using it. He goes, you don't need to use fancy words. He goes, just write the story. So I was like, wow, okay.
I want to bring us back to when you talked about having Joe on the show, Joe Lansdale, and you said
Oh yeah.
with him and all the other fellas that you basically got to learn from them on the thing that you wanted to do, which is what me, Candace, and Brennan do with this show. And so I could relate on that level. But
Mhm.
I want to know, they told you advice, save your rejection. So I'm wondering, it doesn't have to be the same thing. What would you tell newer writers or people maybe that just are, because for me, I got 6 years straight when I started of rejections, and I felt like I was spinning my wheels in the mud until I met a friend in 2019 that helped me kind of figure things out. But maybe it's for a newer writer, maybe it's for someone that's been doing it for years, spinning their wheels in the mud. What would your advice be for them?
For someone just starting out or someone who's been
Someone that maybe needs a kick in the pants, maybe a realignment.
um one piece of advice I give a lot of people is write for fun first. So it's like I've noticed, especially like when I'll be on panels and stuff, and there's at least multiple people that I'd be like, I just get so angry with what I've written and I just won't finish it, or this and that. And they're like, I hate it, as I go. I'm like, oh yeah, I mean that's fine. I was like, but do you enjoy writing? If it's like, yes, I still enjoy writing. I'm like, when they keep writing, I was like, have fun with it. You can be critical when you're done. And I was like, but if you're writing, like, even if you're writing in all lowercase letters, and it just looks like a lunatic's manifesto, just write it, have fun with it, then you can go back and be critical. Being, you have all the time in the world to be critical. It's just you gotta find the fun in it first. So that's like the main piece of advice I always give people. And take the advice that, sometimes, like, the whole Edward Lee thing with me kind of opened my eyes to, like, oh, not everybody's going to have like this amazing reaction to my book, because I was kind of getting used to the fact, it got picked up, and I was like, wow, I'm being, I don't want to say groomed, that's a horrible word, but I'm being, put into this position where I'm going to kind of get to be, what the people I loved were ahead of me. I get to be that one that's writing the kind of disturbing stuff, and then when Edward Lee read it, he was like, oh, it's just, he's like, no, he goes, I can't blurb it, it's not the way it is now. And so that kind of, your final draft might not be the final draft is another big piece of advice I like to give people, because I could write a book and look at it and be like, oh, it's great, and then just put it out there, and then people are like, there's so many continuity errors. There was, this happened on this page, but by this page here, or you think everyone is going to like what you do. um they're not, but don't let that stop you from having fun. Just keep writing it, and don't worry about what family might think about it, because most likely the family's not going to read it anyway. So
Mm,
I was scared to death, with what my family would think. And then I had tons of family members that were like, when are you going to give me a book? I'm like, I'm not giving you a book. Like, if you want to read it, I just feel like family should be the ones that are like, I'll be there every day buying the new one. But no, they're like, I'll read it if you ever give me a copy. So usually you don't have anything to worry about with what family feels
sure.
about what you
And
write.
I did want to ask you one more thing, which was that point you brought up about being the new Ray Garton, which is a name that I wish was brought up more.
Yeah, same
Um,
here.
yeah, and for those that are familiar with him, he actually wrote, I don't know how many episodes he wrote for this show that growing up as a kid, for Nickelodeon. It was the 100 Deeds of Eddie McDowd. I'm pretty sure that's the title. Um, and it's just so weird considering all, like, that guy's written a lot and he's written a lot of great
Mhm.
stuff. So thank you for mentioning that. But looking back now, what kind of pressure is that? Because I can imagine, because you're coming out with your debut, right, with
Mhm.
Sam Hain, and Don's flat out saying, "Look, I want you to be the new, insert the names you look up
Mhm.
to."
Yeah.
Like, did that affect you in an adverse way, or was that inspirational to kind of fuel your fire?
Probably a little from column A, a little from column B.
That's fair.
Um, Yeah, it definitely made me feel comfortable to write what I wanted to write, because I held back a lot. And so, like, if you look at Angel Board and then go from Angel Board to the very next book, which is The Lurkers, that was my second release. It's like night and day difference. And I was like, well, Jack Ketchum was able to write this in off season. Lehman was able to do this in The Cellar, and those are two of my favorite books of all time. I was like, I'm just going to not care at all how far the book takes me. And that's just like one thing because a lot of times I would write and then naturally I would go somewhere, but I'd always go back and change it, if that makes sense. It's like I would sleep on it and go, oh man, I shouldn't have had that character who's so crucial have that happen to them so early in the book. And then I'll go back and change it. And then the book would just fall apart. As I would start to go, I'm like, nope, my natural instincts were right. That person had to go through that. That had to happen. So then I'd go back and change it back. But then it also sort of freaked me out because there's these people that I'm being compared to very early on. And it's like, are people going to look at me as like Kristopher Rufty, or are they going to look at me as like this guy writes like Layman? Like a lot of people say that a lot, which I love. Don't get me wrong. I love that I'm compared to Layman. But at the same time, I'm like, is anyone going to compare someone to Kristopher Rufty, or are they just going to be like, Layman #2 or and stuff like that? So there was that. And then there was the like, well, what if, I go out there and everyone's like, well, who's this guy think he is, coming in here saying he's writing like what we write. So it was a lot. It was exciting, but also a little, I don't want to say overwhelming, but a little intimidating at the same time.
Hmm. I'm really glad you mentioned that, halfway through that answer when you said that you would kind of rethink having something happen to a character early in the draft, and
Mm-hmm.
then eventually kind of come back to no, that gut instinct was right. When you first went there, I thought you were going to tell us that you ended up changing it, and having read The Lurkers, I'm like, ooh, that I don't think so.
Yeah, you probably know what I was talking about then.
I
So
probably know exactly what you're talking about. Now I'm kind of an aside here, but with that book, I absolutely love the kind of 80s era, like small creature horror, your critters, your
yeah,
ghoulies,
yep, same here.
trilogy of terror, the Zabba Zabba guy. And I was wondering if you could, just speak to a little bit about what went into, the creation of the Lurkers with those inspirations in mind.
Well, the funny thing is that the Lurkers is based off originally on this actual urban legend from Wisconsin. Because we shot a couple movies out there, so I learned about, they're called haunchies. So when I first started it, it was going to be a little bit more accurate to the urban legend. But I watched Ghoulies again and started going on this big full moon. I don't know if you watch full moon movies, like the Puppet Master movies, and they always had like all these little monsters in their movies. And I was like, well, dang, that'd be kind of cool if like the haunchies were actually like little creatures, not like another civilization that's hiding, but like these like tiny little creatures that are almost like something straight out of Cannibal Holocaust, but they're just these nasty little like varmints, really, kind of like Tasmanian devils, but human like, And so like Critters and um, Ghoulies, like all four Ghoulies movies, I love them. Even Gremlins to an extent, all influenced that. So I kind of um, was thinking like they could be like almost like little elf type creatures, but um, kind of come from a carnival, but then start living in the woods and cornfields. And yeah, I just went crazy with it. So, but the little monster movies definitely played a huge inspiration in it.
Very cool. Miss Candace.
Yes, sir. Well, that that I was going to go back into your books. So thank you, Brennan, because now I don't have to. We're already there. So, how many do you actually have out? Do you know novels?
Um, my son asked me yesterday, as a matter of fact. So we went on Amazon and we started counting. 20, about to be 26. It'll be 26 on the next one.
That's a hell of a lot.
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind a little
It's
bit.
So, in all of those, and I know I've read, I believe, all of them, with the exception of maybe two. In all of those, do you have particular ones that are your favorite ones, or is it kind of like asking which one of your kids is your favorite?
Well, you know how that is. So I'm sure
I
you
know.
get feel the same way when you're asked that. But I mean, I have ones that I definitely, I kind of look at each book as the whole experience. So it's not just like the book itself, but it's like I kind of flash back to where I was mentally or how much fun I had working on it. Because as y'all all know, not each one is as fun as the other ones. Sometimes one is just like the best experience ever, and the other one is just like pulling teeth, going to
necessary.
the dentist. Yeah, like
Mhm.
it's like I'm finishing this. I might not like where I go, when I'm finished, but I'm getting to the end.
I'm going to cut you off real there on that point. Have you done that? Sorry, this just popped up. Have you done that where that's ended up being one of your favorite stories? I won't interrupt again.
Oh no, um, I don't say if it's been one of my favorites, but um, I like it now, which was Oak Hollow. Um, that one I worked off and on for like a year, and started it over multiple times. And then I got sick and had pneumonia, like really bad. I was like out of work for 2 weeks. Still had the deadline, and I was just laying in bed with it, like a pillow like this, and a notepad on top of it, so the computer wouldn't overheat. And then I just wrote Oak Hollow. I wrote, I think, 86,000 words in 3 days, and had no memory of what I wrote really. And then I sent it to my pre-reader at the time, and it came back. And so keep in mind, I've been with this book for a year, and I was done with it. I didn't even read over her suggestions. I just went through, check changes, accept. And then I sent it to Don. He sent it with his notes and everything, which kind of caught me by surprise that there weren't that many. And then they sent it to the copy editors, the line editors, and all that. And there really wasn't a whole lot of suggestions, just like little things here and there. And for like the longest time, I would not even want to read anything from it again. And it came out on audiobook not too long ago, probably like back in early summer. And I got a free copy of it, it's the little audible code. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be that guy that listens to his own audiobook. So I listened to it, and I was kind of like, wow, it's actually a pretty fun book, and I hated it for years. And like when I'd have it at the table, people were like, what's that call about? I'm like, don't, but somehow that became like one of my more popular Sam Hain titles. And when people would ask me about it and do interviews about it, I'm like, yeah, it was fun. It was supposed to be like a tribute to Edward Lee, but it went off the rails. And but yeah, I can say I like it now. But to answer Candace's question, one that a lot of people do not like, but I love a lot, is Jagger. That's my first killer dog book. It's got some brutality in it, but I had a blast writing it. I don't know why, but it was just like it was a rough year. But whenever I wrote that book, it was like I kind of forgot about everything else that was going on. And another one is A Dark Autumn. That one's pretty brutal, but I had a blast writing it. I wrote it in 4 days, and it's like I just didn't want to stop working on it. Prank Night was another one that was um, a great time. I had so much fun like researching like all the history of Halloween and all that stuff. And it was fun about writing about Halloween because that was my first time I'd ever really written about Halloween, except for a script I wrote for somebody for a movie that got made, but the production company fell apart. So I have no idea whatever was going to happen with that movie. And the first Pillow Face was probably the absolute most fun I'd ever had writing anything until I wrote Old Scratch recently. And so, as much fun as I had with all these other ones, I had an absolute blast with Pillow Face, and nothing came close to it until I wrote Old Scratch recently. So,
out of all of those old ones, all the way up until your most recent one, Lucy, is there any that you wish had more attention on it now?
Yeah, there's something violent. That's probably it's very up there with if someone was like pick your absolute favorite, something violent would be up there near the top. It was the first time I kind of stepped, I don't want to say first time, but it was like one of the times I started kind of pulling in my love of like pulp fiction, crime fiction type stuff into horror tropes. So it was like that one's about a thrill killing couple who kidnap a marriage counselor who's supposed to be like really good at his job. And they basically kidnap him and hold him captive because they want him to help them find the thrill in their marriage again. And it's like they don't enjoy killing people anymore. So they want him to help them find that. And it's basically the book is told in third person when it's the marriage counselor, but then when Jody, the wife, is telling her side, it's first person. And then when Seth, the husband, is telling his side, it's first person. So I kind of borrowed that rotating point of views from Richard Lehman's Endless Night. I don't know if y'all have ever read that, to where it starts off the main story still going forward, but then it flashbacks to like something in the past with this character. And it's like I have like these serial killer spoofs of normal relationship issues. And I love that book. And it was going to be released by Dark Fuse. It was the very last Dark Fuse release before they went under. So I think it was my book and a book by Edward Lorne, but I can't remember what his book was. They were released together on the same day on a Tuesday. And I think like a month later, Dark Fuse closed their doors. So it was like kind of came out, no one read it. So I was like, okay, well, now that I have the rights back, I bought the cover art from the artist and I released it again myself. Still, no one's bought it. So that's what I really wish would get more of an audience. And one of my newest ones, Old Scratch. I wish more people would read that one because, like I said, that's probably put a gun to my head. And if I chose something that was the absolute best thing I've ever written, I'd probably have to say Old Scratch. If it's not the best, it's one of them. That one was a good time.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Not because I got to edit it or read it early or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
it is one of my favorites. Wow. There's so many books I could ask you about. But let me see if these other two want to ask any more
Pillow
about what
Face.
they have recently read,
Pillow
other
Face.
than what was that, Patrick? You want to talk about what? Pillow Face. Let me say this before I let you go ahead and ask your question. Pillow Face Rules is probably one of my top 5 books of yours because that
Oh,
one's
thank you.
freaking amazing.
I was
But
worried
anyway.
about writing a sequel to something that far back. But I was kind of looking at it, I was like, well, Halloween did it, Chainsaw Massacre did it, they had a lot more years in between than I did. So it was kind of like was like, I wanted to write like a direct sequel to the original, but one that didn't ignore the other stuff. So that was Pillowface Rules, and I was really scared to death that people weren't going to like it, but they seem to like it. So
It's fantastic. But anyway, Patrick, we'll go over to you and let you ask your question, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, so I love Pillowface. It is one of the most like it's super realistic, and because slashers, they they can be realistic, but they kind of go over the top,
mhm.
which is fun. But yours was really super like surreal, realistic. That's not the right term. Anyways, moving on. I'm just wondering why, like, if you went in knowing I want to make my yeah, he's a bad guy.
Oh yeah, he's a bad guy. Don't get
I
that wrong. He's a bad guy.
yeah, it's just the relationship he develops with the kid. He just all
Yeah.
right. Anyways, man, I loved it, and I'm just wondering if you went in knowing that you wanted to make him a veteran.
Actually, yeah. That came from this a movie I made called Psycho Holocaust, where they were characters in that movie,
Mm,
Buddy, Carp, and Pillowface.
mm,
Not the ones that we get in the book, but very close. And those three characters were inspired by this. I don't know if it was a documentary or what, but it was something on that I saw online, and it was about um, veterans coming back from Iraq, and they're okay for a little bit, and then they were just snapping. And the final one was a real brutal story, and I ended up having to shut it off. And I was like, I can't. I was like, that's scary. It's like you leave. You're kind of thinking you're going, which you are. Protecting your country and all that is a good reason to go do it. But when you come back, it's like maybe these guys can't turn it off, and maybe it's like they're still soldiers no matter what. And so they kind of look at everyone except for their core three as the villain. Um, so that's what drives, especially the leader, Buddy. He was as you know in the book, he was the documentary filmmaker who was there.
mm.
So he kind of looks at everything through an artistic side, but Pillowface and Carp, they look at it. They don't see the art. They just want to kill. And so Buddy uses that, and it's like they're some ruthless people.
Pictured him as Tom Savini because for those that don't know, Tom Savini was a photographer
Mm-hmm.
during Vietnam War. That's why I couldn't work with George Romero during the first Night of the Living Dead. But
Yeah,
that's how I
that's
just
actually
picture.
what inspired that character
Really?
was that Tom Savini interview I saw. It was like that Scream Greats that Tom Savini did, and he was talking about how he went over and he saw the real thing, so
Mm-hmm.
he was able to come back and recreate it for the movies. And I was like, well, dang, what if you saw the real thing, and when you came back, all the death you still saw that you were causing, still just you know you were still almost like documenting it. It wasn't like it's like you could separate yourself from it. So it was just kind of that's what inspired and influenced the creation of Buddy was that. And I also never put their real names in the stories either. It's like I know what their names are in my head, but I'm never going to say it. No matter how many stories I write with Pillowface, I'm never going to say what his real name is either.
Interesting. And I got one more comment. I'm gonna bet that no one's made this analogy before, but Pillowface to me was kind of like the Beast from Beauty and the Beast because you start out with this gorgeous man. And I mean, really go into example. I mean, talk about how he was beforehand. He was a quiet guy. He was good at his job, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't really talk about how he was. Whereas with the Beast, I forget his real name. He was an asshole. But
Yeah.
then they get turned into this creature, um, and they kind of just resemble who they were on the inside. Actually, the more I talk about this out loud, the less I like this analogy. So, Candace, why don't you take over? This sucks, and I'm keeping this in. I'm not cutting this out. That sucked
I
ass.
could tell
you
when
can
you
cut
were
that
starting.
out.
It's one of those
I can
things where in your
tell.
head you're like, it sounds good, and then you talk, you're like, you're a fucking
Then you're
idiot.
like, no, stop talking.
Yeah. I'm not gonna cut that out. Go ahead, Candace.
I kind of think I know where you were trying to go with that, but yeah, you didn't get there. It's okay.
Half a point for attempt.
Um, Christopher,
Mhm.
you want to know what my favorite one is?
Well, sure.
And you might know. I think I've mentioned this one, but The Vampire of Plainfield. I want you to talk
Ah,
about that one because, first of all, people who don't know this, you need to tell them about this book. Second of all, if they've not read it or if they have, they need to listen to the narration because it's just superb. So,
oh, the audiobook?
yeah.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's absolutely great.
So tell us about that, just the whole thing, where, the what, the how, where where the idea
The
came
idea,
from.
which is where a lot of my ideas come from, is that it's usually a conversation and I make a joke. And like Bigfoot Beach was a joke that I made with my kids, and Vampire Plainfield was a joke I made with a friend of mine. We were watching a movie called Deranged. I don't know if none of y'all have seen that movie. It's from the 70s. Speaking of Tom Savini, he did the effects for it. And it was influenced by Ed Gein. It was kind of almost like a biopic horror movie, but they changed the names and changed, the facts and kind of made it of like a slasher movie. But it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And there's a part where he's in the cemetery and he's digging up bodies. And I turned to my friend. I was like, how cheesy would it be if he accidentally dug up a vampire? And then we laughed and smoked more stuff. And then we kept talking. And I was like, yeah, I was like, Ed would probably think it was like something cool, like he could take it on the road and like show it off to people, like, look at this vampire I found. And then that stayed with me, and I was like, holy cow, that's kind of a good idea. And I was like, what if Ed Gein did, when he was robbing graves, what if he dug up a vampire and pulled the stake out of its chest? And it's kind of like the Hammer movie type vampire. It comes back to life and then is set loose in Plainfield. And then he's like, oh crap. He goes, what have I done? He goes, and it's not that he's like going, oh no, all these innocent people are in trouble. It's like, no, he's like, people are going to know that I caused this. People are going to know how I caused this. He's like, I need to stop it. So that's pretty much really the gist of Vampire Plainfield. Is I took my love of movies like Fright Night, which is probably one of my absolute favorite horror movies, and then my love of 50s horror and 50s, books and everything. And I actually know quite a bit about the Ed Gein case, and I would I would change names here and there, because I didn't want like all the victims to be. I don't want people to think I was celebrating what happened to them or anything, because I wasn't. I want people to know that I don't think it's cool what Ed Gein did at all. But I was like, I was like, if he would have set loose a vampire by mistake, I was like, this is what I think he would do to try and cover that up. So that's kind of where that story came from.
That's believable. That's believable in the sense where, because I'm into all that shit too, and
You have to listen to. You have to listen to.
Yeah, the audiobook is amazing. David Stiefel is the
It's
narrator.
fantastic. Yeah.
And when
I
I was
mean, you
talking
sold me
about,
already, so yeah,
yeah,
I'm going
you've got
to.
to his voice. He sounds a lot like Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah.
His voice. He's got that reanimator type, accent. So it's like you can almost picture Jeffrey Combs as Ed Gein. And it's just like, and that's honestly who I pictured in my head when I wrote it, was
Mm.
Jeffrey Combs playing Ed Gein. And
Who do you think's creepier, Ed Gein or Albert Fish?
uh, Albert Fish was probably more evil. Ed Gein
Yeah.
was creepier, definitely creepier.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Vampire. Yeah. I That might be my top one. I know it's in the top 5, but it just might be my number one.
Yeah, not
But
many people say that that's their favorite because I kind of get torn apart a little bit on that one because it's Ed Gein. And they're like, well, you could have just made like a fictional serial killer. I'm like, it wouldn't have had the same
yeah,
effect, you know?
no, and that's what nailed it for me was how unique it was, and the fact that it was him. And there's a little bit of that twisted sort of, I shouldn't be laughing at this, but I am.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I did try to
but
make it funny.
yeah, but the story itself is not. So it's like a nice blend of laugh out loud at this, but then you're pulled right back into holy shit, what is happening? And
Yeah,
it, yeah, loved it. So
that makes me feel good to hear because I know Mike Lombardo I think he said that's his favorite too. And you're the only two that's ever said that, I do believe.
I want more eyes on that one. I know you want more eyes on the other one, but I mean, if we could take my top 5, then we're gonna go with, that one and
It
old
would
scratch.
definitely make me feel better about writing a sequel. It's like I have a sequel idea where it's a werewolf, so it would be called The Beast of Plainfield, and
Yes.
it takes place leading up to when Ed Gein gets arrested. So that's would kind of wrap up my Ed Gein story, with that one. And I have a great idea. I mean, I've already got it all through in my head, and I was like, I just hesitate because of the response that the first one got because like, oh, you shouldn't make Ed Gein any type of hero. I'm like, but he's not a hero. Like he's
No,
really not. I mean, like if you look at it, he's not. The real Ed Gein had friends. He was friends with the neighborhood kids, like the Plainfield kids. Like they thought Ed Gein was just like kooky old Eddie, and he would make them laugh, and they thought he had like cool weird stuff in his house. So I had like these kids in that, and they were like his only friends, sort of. So they get mixed up in it. And the story is really told through this character who's based on a real kid, but I changed the name and all that stuff. And so he's actually the lead of the story because I was like, even early on, I was like, Ed Gein cannot be the lead, even though he's the one that causes all this. He's ultimately the one that's going to have to resolve it. He can't be the lead because people aren't going to like that. And I was like, and I don't know if I could make him a lead that I could cheer for either. And but I could write about a kid who's an aspiring writer. I was like, I could write about him. And, I sort of took things from my own childhood and put them into him, like sneaking out the window and stuff like that. And, having a typewriter and wanting to write these stories that your parents, they didn't mind that you wrote, but they kind of wished you wrote something different, and so yeah, the whole Timmy is the main character, not Eddie. Eddie's kind of like the one that messes everything up, and Timmy gets pulled into it, and it's almost like him and his grandmother have to help Eddie fix this thing that Eddie caused, and none of them want to be a part of it to begin with. So
yeah. So the werewolf one's gonna be next, right? Or soon? 'Cause
no, no,
soon.
I keep going to write it, and like I said, I'm like, I don't know. But the more I think about it, the more it's kind of, you feel like you're being scratched on the back, like it's like a hey, like hey. That's kind of what I feel like that book is doing, and it's like, hey, don't forget about me. And that's how Pillowface Rules was. It took me 12 years to write Pillowface Rules. I
Mm.
even wrote the Lurkers Pillowface book before that, and I had the idea for Pillowface Rules when I wrote that book. And so it's like I wouldn't be surprised if by summertime I started writing it. So I even
Yeah.
already have a cover for it. I'm like, if I have a cover for it, of course I'm going to write it. But I don't know. It just keeps getting pushed back because I start working on something else instead. And I do have the opening written, but that's about as far as I've gotten.
I suppose I can wait for it.
Yeah.
All right. So I do want to get into Lucy, your new one, because I mean, I don't know, you have your favorites and all of that, but I think every new one that you write just becomes automatically my favorite, my new
I've been
favorite.
thankful that it's been that way with me lately, the past couple years too. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah. But Lucy is fantastic. Um, I don't want to tell them about the book. Why don't you? And then I'll tell you why I loved it as much as I did.
Okay. Lucy is basically the way I told my friend about it. His name's Steve. He and I are both, we each own pit bulls, and we love pit bulls, and they're like goofy little, sweet dogs. They get a bad rap. And so we, you know, just kind of make jokes and everything. And I pitched it to him, and he's sort of like my go-to guy with certain ideas, not like all ideas, but if I have like an idea, I'll kind of be like, hey, what if like the Vampire Plainfield one? That's who I pitched that to. And so we were talking on the phone, and I was like, what about a movie or a book that's like, you have a pit bull that goes out for revenge because somebody hurts, her human. And then we kind of laughed and we were like, yeah, could you imagine our dogs trying to do that? And I was like, but yeah, what if it was like our dogs, the real sweet kind of, you know that they'll be protective because they are, but it's like, what if they go and track down the people that do it? I'm like, it'd be like Death Wish, but with a dog. I'm like the reversed John Wick, and
They should make that movie.
yeah. So it's like it's a pit bull who she literally goes after the bad guys, and it's kind of like in my mind, I pictured it as like an exploitation movie, like maybe written and directed by Larry Cohen, who did like Black Caesar and stuff like that, and of course, he did the It's Alive movies and wrote Maniac Cop. But I'm a big Larry Cohen fan, and so in my head, I pictured it like it's modern. It takes place in present day, but in my head, I saw it as like a '70s gritty exploitation, Dirty Harry type movie, but with a dog as the main character. And now she's like, a lot of people kind of think that. Well, I'm being joined. By my cat. Hello. So a lot of people think that the whole book is told through her point of view, but it's not. She sort of like becomes she's like the focus character that connects all the characters, but then she becomes the character, if that makes sense. And so it's it was I wrote that one very fast too, and I had a blast doing it because I really enjoyed Lucy um, as a character, and then the bad guys are some of the best bad guys I think I've ever created since the pillow face bad guys. They're unique. They're a disco loving um, four member group who look at disco as a religion, and everything in their life they can reference and compare to a disco song. And I actually dreamed those characters. They a few years back, I had a dream where this kid comes to the front door and he's like, "These people are after me," and this is a completely unprovoked dream. And he comes in, so I shut the door and lock it. And I'm like, "Who's coming after you?" And he's like, "The Razors." I was like, "The who?" And he's like, "The Razors." And then I hear Dancing Queen like starting to play, like very muffled and faint. And it's like, you can just hear it. It's getting louder and louder and louder. And then I see the headlights because it's at night. So I see the headlights start shining in through the windows. And then Disco Queen's getting louder. And the doors open, and there's two guys and two women step out, and they come into the house. And those are the people I put in the book. It's like I woke up in the middle of the night and I wrote that down. I wrote the Razors, two sets of twins, um, boy and girl, twins, each one involved with the other. And that was all I wrote. And I was like sadistic. I think that was like the other note I made. And it took 5 years, but I finally found a story to put them in.
Yeah. It's co-loving bad guys. Um, That was pretty much why I loved it. But Lucy and the mix of those four, you take her in the first half of the book, and she's just this amazing dog. She's just gentle and she's kind and she's just everything you would want this dog to be. And then all the bad stuff takes place, and this flip, her switch just flips, and then you have the disco
Hmm.
bad guys. And I could visualize a lot of the scenes with them and the humor that I experienced behind all of that while all of this stuff is happening just gave it this like fever dream surrealness that was like unbelievable. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's in my top five again too, and I've got to quit saying that with your books, but that's okay. I fully expect the next one to make it into my top five too, so I think you should just keep writing books. But
I should mention that because you're talking about the switch being flipped.
yeah.
Lucy, like a lot of characters from the exploitation stuff, they come from their dark past, and Lucy had a dark past
Mm.
that she's got this good life now, and then like a bad thing happens to her good life that makes the past come alive in her again. So it's like, she smells blood again and it sets her off. So she goes after the people that wronged her, one by one. So and boy, does she go after them.
Yeah, she does. Brendan or Patrick, you two got anything else
A
to
Dark
add?
Autumn. I know
Okay,
we're running
Dark
out of
Autumn.
time. We're running out of time, but Candace said that's she suggested it, so I
It
did the
is.
audiobook. Um, hmm. I have a specific question asked, but it would spoilish areas.
Well, you can ask
So
it, and if it's too spoiler, we
I'll
can always.
I'll try to word it I'll try to dance around the exact thing, but what the okay, so the climax, playing words, the climax of the
Yeah.
scenario is role reversed
Hmm.
in more than one way. And I gotta imagine that they were decisions and thought you probably calculated, how is this gonna get a react, like who's gonna react to this in which way? Or maybe it was different because I actually don't know when it was published, but at least nowadays, that might be hard for some writers to put out
Uh,
unless they were of a certain group of people. I'm probably just giving away the thing. I'm trying not
I
to
don't think
spoil
so.
now.
I don't think so.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well,
I'm
I
a
was
I'm a
worried
professional interviewer, sir.
because I was originally that came out in uh, 2012, I think,
Okay.
2013, and it was come on. My cat got down, but now he keeps acting like he wants to get back up here. Come on. Um, and I was approached by a publisher, and they were like, "Can you write something for us?" And they're like, "We don't care what it is." And I was like, "Okay," which I loved that because I'd never been approached like that before. That was the first time I was ever approached.
Hmm.
So they were like, "But it has to be a novella." So we want it to be like 35,000 words or less, between like 25 to 35,000. And I was like, okay. So I always had that idea, and I'd even had a screenplay of that. Um, so I kind of kept the screenplay in my head, and I almost like I did a novelization of my own screenplay. And I sent it to them, and they were like, "Oh, no, we didn't want that." They're like, "That's way too no, that's not what we were wanting." But thanks anyway. They didn't ask for anything else. I was like, "Oh crap!" I was like, "Well, there went that." So then I was telling Don about it in an email, and he goes, "Well, send it to me." And he goes, I'll read it and see what I think." He goes, "I'll publish it," after he read it. And I was like, "Okay." So he goes, "Be ready for backlash." He goes, "Because you're going to get it." And I was like, "Oh
Hmm.
yeah, I know." I was like, "I know." And so emails and messages started coming in, but it was never any backlash. It was women talking about how hot they thought that was. They were like, "Yeah, it's absolutely." They're
Oh
like,
my
"We can't
God.
believe how erotic this book is." And I was like,
Holy shit.
"No." I was like, I must have messed up. was like, because it is not supposed to be erotic at all.
Nah.
And they're like, oh, we loved it. Like, that's just a fantasy. And they're like, oh, you tapped into it. I mean, I'll be at a convention and people will come up and they're like, I bought this last year, and they'll like tap a dark autumn, and I go, oh, really? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, so hot. And I'm like, could you imagine? Like, if it was
I
like
know
me walking
for
up to
a
someone going
fact, if you
I bought I
reverse
spit on your
those,
grave.
yeah.
So hot.
Oh man.
Gosh, yeah. But I was just like, I failed with that one. Then I was like, because it was supposed to like make, and then but people were like the very ending, like with what happens to the person, when everything's said and done. They're like, I didn't like that. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, then I made the right decision by going with that ending, because it would be a hard sell, and to convince anybody that that was not something that he could, prevent, I guess.
I thought it was a great book. I thought that, fuck, if I wrote that, I would be. I don't drink no more, but boy, howdy, I'd go for some Johnny Walker or something, man. Because holy shit, that had to take something out of you.
It did. That one and Desolation both about ripped me apart. So that one was brutal. I guess maybe A Dark Autumn sort of prepared me for when I wrote Desolation, because that's the one that really tore my guts apart. So um, and that's kind of one of my more tamer books too, is Desolation.
That's all I got on Dark Autumn, because I really don't want to spoil it. But I do want to say, whoever's listening or watching, that you should really consider that. But just be ready. And if you say it's hot, don't say that to Christopher, because that's kind of fucking weird considering the content in it. And I was
I
trying to
get I
say,
get I get weird things all the time. It's like I've had people, at a table picking up a book and reading the back of it, and they look at it and look, you go, is there any torture in this? And I go, yeah. And they're like, okay, I'll take it. So it's like, I'm like, oh. And then get to talking about, so what do you do for a living? They're like, oh, I'm a school teacher. And I'm like, oh, okay.
that just, Brennan, then you
So
go, buddy. That just, I don't know why, but he's talking about weird stuff you got from fans. And first time we had Sean Cosby on, he said that the weird thing that he gets, I don't know if it's still a thing, is usually girls will send him pictures of them in the tub with his book, and they're not
mm,
showing anything inappropriate, but that's just always the scene. I'm like, that's fucking
yeah,
weird, because like it has nothing to do with any of the books.
I had a person make an entire calendar. Each month was that person with one of my books, and then bring it to me as a gift
I guess it
in
depends
front
on
of
the
my
person.
daughter. So
It would really, really, really depend on the person to determine
And
how
the
that.
appropriateness of the picks.
Yeah, that too. Big. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Brennan.
um, I, Patrick highly recommends his choice. I highly recommend The Devoured and the Dead, and I love the kind of horror western thing that's really horror western, weird western thing that's come back in the last few years.
Yeah, same here.
And when you were invited to write for Death's Head at the time and take part in that kind of first series, I'm wondering with this book, did you want to kind of subvert tropes? Like the first thing that jumps out to me is you set it in the winter. And
Mhm.
typically we think of a Western and we think of like the desert. I mean, hell, that's where I set my Western books, but um, yours takes place, among the cold, and it's kind of crucial to the environment with that, well, I won't make a comparison because that could be considered a spoiler, but so, what kind of thought process did you put into writing a horror western, and did you set out to really try and subvert tropes and make something unique?
Yeah, a little bit. What's funny though is they didn't originally ask me. I asked them actually, because I read Wiley's book, and I loved it. And then when I found out that was going to be like a series, I emailed them and says there. At this point in time, I had not. I put out one. I'd put out one book in like a couple years, because crazy life stuff, rough few years, and I co-wrote a book with Wrath, and Death's Head put that out, and with Wrath James White, and So I kind of had that communication, and they were like, if there's ever anything else, you want us to publish, if you have something, to send our way, send it our way. So with that in mind, I was like, I'm going to ask them if, that I could possibly write a splatter Western. And they said yes. And then they were like, what would yours be about? And I was like, well, it'd be about people who get stranded in the snow and um, without giving too much away, are kind of forced to do certain things that curse them in the process. And they were like, kind of like the Wendigo legend. And I was like, a little bit. And they were like, yeah, sounds good. So I ran with it. And going back to my big influences of Jack Ketchum, I thought back to The Girl Next Door, and the way that was written, told in first person, but it's like clearly, the character as an adult now reflecting on what happened. And so that's the route I went. So it's almost like, the character is just putting his memories down. And I figured that would be a good way to go to like that one moment in time over that span of those weeks and just condense it down really fast. I was
Yeah.
like, because if someone's like basically like not like a journal, but almost like kind of, writing like their own story, it's like I don't think they would go into super details about stuff that doesn't seem quite as crucial as what ends up happening to them. So I think that's why that book kind of begins and just keeps going. It's just like it doesn't stop until literally it's
Yeah.
over. And I had a lot of fun writing that one too.
What an interesting comparison for you to bring up The Girl Next Door, because there's a lot of moments in this book, but there's one particular like end of chapter that stuck with me. And I think that there's a way to read this book and call that particular moment shock value, but I think that that person would also read The Girl Next Door and call some of those moments shock value, when really it's a single glimpse of the overall horror of the situation, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I wonder, is that something that you consciously do either in this book or in your work? Is mimic Jack Ketchum's ability to put shocking moments into his book, but not have them read gratuitously or obnoxiously?
Yeah, definitely. He's one of those that can like reach into your chest, pull your heart out, but at the same time nauseate you, but at the same time you thank him for it. It's
Mm.
like that's how his books are to me. Um, you can tell that he's writing because he's putting that in there 'cause that's where the story took him. He's not sitting
Mhm.
down and going, how can I make this as uncomfortable and as terrible for these people? No. And I look at the Richard Lehman the same way. It's like, yeah, his books go crazy, but I don't think he sits down and goes, I wonder how I could do this, that, and this, and just make the reader like flip out. I think that's where the story naturally takes them. So I used to always like, I even kind of make fun of myself now for it, but I used to always tell people when I would be interviewed, I'd be like, yeah, I like to write without a safety net, which is true. So it's kind of like anything can happen if you fall off the tightrope. But one thing is like there's not going to be a safe landing, and that's kind of like the one rule I keep is like if I feel like I'm trying too hard, then it's not where I'm going naturally. So if I'm having to think about it, and go, oh, okay, well, how in the world am I going to brutally make this person go away in this story? If I'm having to think that, I'm like, no, I'm like, that's not the natural progression. That's me seriously trying to think of a way to make the person who's going to read it go, oh, wow.
And it's going to come off that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's enough of that out there. And I just, like I said, I like the story. And I know it sounds so cliched, but I like the story to tell me where it's going, not the other way around. And I'm sure all y'all know that when you like get down, you start writing and start really getting into it, you'll have an idea of where the story's going to go, but then it doesn't go there. And you're like, holy, well, how did that happen? And it's like, you just keep going with it. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's almost like magic, it just takes you one way and you're not prepared for, or expecting it.
It is, and you end up with, a shocking moment that serves the story as opposed to a story that only exists to highlight a shocking moment. And there's a
Right.
colossal difference in those two
Yeah.
things.
And I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Candace, I'm going to throw it back to you.
All righty. Well, going on 10:15 here, sir. So with that in mind, is there anything else that you want to mention that we have not yet?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm here. Yeah.
Here. How about what's next? Anything you want to mention as far as what you have in mind for 2024?
um, yeah, I believe the Redneck Zombies novelization will be released sometime this summer. So I'm very excited about that. Super excited about that. And I'll talk more about that. I bet Ed would like to probably come on the show and talk about that as well one day.
Make it happen.
Yeah.
We love Ed. He's
And
one of the most, sorry to cut you off, but real quick, is I don't think I talked about this before. Ed's one of the most popular video version. I don't know why it doesn't translate for audio, but yeah, he's well received. So you and Ed, make it happen, baby.
It's because Ed is such a handsome man and you have to do the video version.
Nailed it.
But yeah, and I'll just maybe be the playing field or be something this year. I don't know. I've got some other stuff. I'm already working on the next book, and have another couple anthologies that are coming out that I have short stories in, that you have short stories in as well, Candace.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. I went from not getting a whole lot of anthology invites to this past year. I got quite a few, and that was fun. I was like, yes, I was like, keep them coming. I was like, I love doing it. And yeah, that's about it. Just keep writing and putting out stuff. And Redneck Zombies
You have
coming
a
out this
couple
summer.
conventions, right?
Yes. Mad Monster Party in Concord, North Carolina, coming up in 2 weeks, and I'll be at AuthorCon 3. As of right now, I'm not going to be at AuthorCon 4, but that might change. And I'm also supposed to do a small convention in Pennsylvania, and I'll be able to talk more about that as my name gets really announced and stuff.
Okay. All right. Any last words from either of you two? Brennan, Patrick?
I would just like to. Does this count as final thoughts, or are you just reaching
Sure.
strangely?
Final
All right.
thoughts. People, final
In that
thoughts.
case, I would like to use the opportunity to thank Kristopher for your time. I absolutely loved the books that I read from you so far, and I am going to dive into more. I'm going to dive into Candace's top 5, which is so elastic that it actually encompasses more like 13 or 14.
That's okay
But
too. So
thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday night, man.
I appreciate the invite. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I got to piggyback. Really appreciate talking to you. I want to keep reading what happens with Paleface. And I got to read the other ones that Candace suggested. And not making fun, but I'm pretty sure it's
Just
like
read them all.
15 bucks at least. So I hope that people hear this and check out your books.
I hope so as well. I'm just going to keep cranking them out anyway. So
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
So yeah, I guess we can wrap with that. My final thoughts would be thank you for your time, but you already know that. I guess my actual final thoughts in this interview would be short story, real quick, but you know this. I was reading you long before I started to write, and having met you a couple years ago, and then now that I'm editing you,
Yeah.
talk about a weird experience. Thank you for that, for when we met, for keeping me sane, keeping me calm, and you know, because I was about to lose my shit on the panel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been a wild ride to go from a fan to a friend to your editor. Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for that and for your work and for you, just who you are. So
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah.
And,
Patrick, close us out, sir.
yeah, next episode is 234 with Ed Brubaker and Jordan Harper. We're going to be talking about Jordan Harper's paperback release of Everybody Knows. We're going to be talking about Ed Brubaker's upcoming book, and together they are working on some really neat stuff, a show. We'll talk about that in the details then. And as always, you have many choices in podcasts. Thanks for picking us. Bye.
Bye-bye.